We now know that Minecraft's Spring Drop is going to be the long-awaited nature and ambience update, or basically what the wild update was supposed to be. There are still many weeks left in the snapshot cycle for this drop, meaning we are almost certainly going to see more content added to it since it is still very small right now. So, seeing as it's basically become tradition on this channel, I'm going to be discussing what features I think this update could really use or benefit from. And this one's pretty important. An ambience update is something that Minecraft has been in pretty bad need of. It's been up there as one of the most requested updates. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So let's start things off with talking about features, and no, I don't mean features just as in new content, I mean features as in land formations, things such as trees, or even desert wells, since apparently those are also counted as a feature in the game files. With everything that we've seen so far in the snapshots for this drop, it seems pretty clear that one of Mojang's objectives with it is to diversify nature. They want the wild to have more variety in how it generates. So far they've been doing this just through new plants, but another really good way to do this would be with new features. For example, like we saw in the birch forest concept art, they could add fallen logs that are hollow and have moss on them, to make them a bit different from the current ones on bedrock. Another above ground feature could be things like boulders or just patches of stone or rocks. They of course could also take things even further with the new plant life and add mushrooms that grow on the sides of trees, also similar to what we saw in the birch forest concept art. Adding some new farm crops that the player could find growing in the wild could also work. Or even the ground itself could have more variety in what blocks it is composed of. For example, in forests in real life, of course, they don't have that much grass often. Or it can be a mix, so what if forests had like a mix of coarse dirt and grass sometimes? I'm sure there's a lot more stuff that they could do with plant life, but I don't want to spend too much time on that, because I'd like to move on to talking about mobs. More specifically, the Moo Bloom. I've seen a lot of people saying that it would fit really well in this update, and yeah, I agree it probably would. If Mojang does want to show the community that the mob vote losers aren't necessarily gone forever, then adding the Moo Bloom now would be a really smart move on their part. Otherwise, it really wouldn't be looking too good for the mob vote losers, since Tricky Trials was also a really good opportunity for the Copper Golem, but of course that wasn't added either. And while we're on the subject of the vote losers, originally when a lot of people, myself included, pictured Mojang doing a nature update back before they started doing the drop system, it was sort of imagined like they might add in all 3 of the biome vote losers, since that would have roughly made for 1 year's worth of content, more or less. Obviously now, with this being a drop, they cannot do all 3. But there is one of them that I think would kind of make sense with this drop, and that is the desert. And the reason that I say that is, one, because if you look at the Savannah and the Badlands, they've already gotten some updates with this drop. Savannas have the falling leaf particles from the trees, Badlands can have the wooded areas which have the leaf litter and leaf particles. But in terms of visuals, the desert is still exactly the same as it was before, since there are no trees in it. If it were to not get updated, it would probably be the least ambient biome in the overworld after this drop. The other reason that I think the desert is somewhat likely is because Mojang has already showed interest in updating it with giving it ambient sounds in the latest snapshot. With all of the other more life-filled biomes getting all of these new plants and particle effects, the desert just kind of gets left out. So, of course, doing the update with the palm trees and the meerkats could definitely be a way to fix that and bring it up to that new standard. But the next thing that I want to talk about actually are those ambient sounds that I just mentioned a bit ago. So far, this drop has only added nature sounds for the desert, no other biomes. So it stands to reason that Mojang is probably going to add ambient sounds to a lot of the other biomes. specifically the more common ones like forests and plains. It would be especially nice if they had sounds based on the time of day, like in broad daylight maybe it's birds chirping, and then at night you hear crickets. In fact, just an observation here, something I've noticed with this drop is that it seems like Mojang is kind of trying to bring all of the other biomes up to the standard that they set with the Pale Garden. I say that because the Pale Garden, unlike the other overworld surface biomes, had ambient sounds in it, and also it had falling leaves. Although the same was also true for the Cherry Blossom Grove in that regard. That aside, one of the last things I want to talk about here are the fireflies. I still don't really know how to feel about them being a particle effect attached to a plant, but I think it's starting to grow on me. My guess is that Mojang did it that way for performance reasons, but I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on the current implementation of fireflies, because of course it may still be subject to change in this state of development. I for one would like to have it so that players can make jars and collect fireflies in them. Maybe they could even be used to make like bright yellow lanterns. Maybe they could even be used to make firefly weapons. I don't know. There's any number of things that they could be used for. So I do hope that Mojang does at least something just a bit more with them. Another thing here based off of the current snapshots, it does seem likely that we'll see different variants warm and cold for chickens at least, since Mojang is adding these mechanics for there to be warm and cold variants of the basic farm animals. The other one is sheep. Sheep are a bit less likely because their wool color can already be changed with dye, but they could get new variants by having different shapes or perhaps different skin colors. But I would definitely say that chickens have a better chance at getting new variants. And now there is one more thing that I want to throw out there. And I don't think Mojang could realistically add it in this drop. It would be a big thing that would take a lot of time. And that is a rework to how bodies of water and rivers generate. Having them be able to generate in more sizes at different heights would really help the aesthetic and terrain of the overworld. But of course, like I said, terrain generation does not seem to be easy to change for Mojang. So honestly, I don't know if we will ever see any kind of a river or water rework, but it would be really nice if we do at some point. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching up until this point. The support is greatly appreciated. Anyway, I hope to see you in the next one, and for now, goodbye.